And most of my life is just me being, with a very small group of people, just the folks I know, and working. Me being out in the world is a really, really small part of my life. But I also recognize that my stories come from the world, and the moment I sort of shut myself off from the world is going to be that's going to be when the stories dry up. That I'll come away from doing promotion with enough ideas for the next dozen books. And that if I were to just stay home and do nothing but the writing part, I would write myself dry within, a couple months. So being out in the world is a really, really important part of the whole process.
Is there something always that triggers, is it more of in a general sense, or is it sometimes you're out on the street, you see a guy doing something, and from that one moment, there's a book? Or is it just being able to take in things in a more general sense, I guess?
Well, typically, I always think a good story is not the story that stuns everybody into silence. A good story is the story that excites everybody and evokes them to tell their stories. So when you're at a party and somebody tells a story that makes everybody want to jump forward and tell a similar story, then those are the stories I look for. Because you see how this story, this idea, has a connection to everyone's life and resonates with everyone's personal experience. And that those ideas can be developed by hundreds of people. You'll get everybody's version of that same thing. And so those are the stories I look for, the stories that evoke and excite other people to tell similar stories.
And as you get bigger, I guess the battle always is keeping the core happy, keeping your core, but also making it open enough for other people to come in, because the more people that read it, whether it's a financial thing or it's just you want people to read your book, that's why you publish books. How do you manage keeping that core along with becoming more popular, making things viable for other people to come into?
The key is not giving a That's the secret. But no, seriously, because when I was doing this and I wasn't getting paid and nobody would look at my work, the only kind of reward I got was taking it to workshop every Thursday night and drinking wine with some friends or drinking beer and reading each other's work and sort of talking about what worked and what could work better. So I get to go to a party every Thursday, and that's still the reason why I do this. God bless folks who read it in Russia, but they're not the reason why I do it. Mm-hmm. And I would still do it regardless of whether or not people read it, just so I could go to that party on Thursday night and see that same group of friends that I've been meeting with since 1991. They're at this point the longest friendships I've had in my life.
Choke is the second book of yours that's been made into a movie. You're going into this with a lot of people that have read the book, and I guess, a lot of people, oh, that looks painful. A lot of people are going to see the movie that haven't read the book. I guess on who are you, how much of, when you're involved in the making of this movie or even agreeing to let this movie be made, how much of, well, the people who read the book aren't going to, that's not true to the book, or how much of this are you interested in the people who have read the book or the people who haven't, I guess. I don't know if I'm phrasing that right. When you're making the movie, how much do you care that it's true to, what you were intending in the book?
I don't want it to be true at all.
Oh, really?
Because I think in a way when the movie really, really panders to the book and it tries to be the most incredibly faithful thing of the book, copy of the book, it loses any authority. And in a way, I want to see the next generation of Choke. I want to see somebody do the things with a story that takes it to another level, that kind of evolves the story, rather than just does a picture version of the story. So often, even when a movie is a fantastically faithful version of the book, like Rosemary's Baby or The Graduate, it kind of erases and obliterates the book.
Mm-hmm.
People forget that those stories, Stepford Wives, that they even were a book. But when something does what Fight Club did, where it's faithful up to a certain point, but it establishes its own authority, it does what it wants to do, then the book and the movie can coexist as their own things. And so in a way, as long as they call it Choke, I'm happy. But beyond that, I really want to be as surprised as anybody else. So I want to see them do something different.
It was a different perspective than Fight Club. Fight Club, I hadn't read the book, and I just saw the movie. And it was funny, when I've learned to appreciate the book, but after seeing the movie, when I read the book, the movie resonated more with me than the book did. Because I think it was because I saw the movie first. And I was nervous going into seeing Choke because I had read it first, and I had already established in my mind that it was going to be difficult to do what you did in the book and to make it faithful. You kind of create this it's a weird kind of reality, I guess, you have in your books. It's not always the same, but it's never quite like real life, but it's never quite far enough from real life where it's science fiction. And I felt like Fincher created an alternate reality, like in a real good way. It might not have been the same way you did it, but it certainly wasn't real and it certainly wasn't fake. Choke is kind of the same thing, I think, when reading it. Would you agree with that? Hear what I'm saying, I guess?
I would take it a step further and say that everything is the same thing. A couple of years ago, I was talking to a guy from Scotland, and he was talking about a song, and he was saying it's that song about the girlfriend who's stealing food. You know that song? It was really popular. It's about this guy and his girlfriend is stealing all of his food. And I didn't know that song, so I said, sing it. And he goes, every time you go away, you take a piece of meat with you. I said, no, dude, that's not meat. He says, you take a piece of me with you. It's a song about cannibalism. And I love that we all experience our own version of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what you think of as reality is not what I think of as reality. And so I think in a way when you tell a story, it should be tweaked enough that it suggests that very different way in which we all individually perceive the world. That kind of, it just echoes with how different reality is for each of us.
One thing that I noticed about Choke, at least for me, is that I felt like the characters, and maybe it was because it was good acting or maybe because it was actually people in front of me, everybody seemed a little more human. I guess I cared about everybody a little bit more, which I couldn't decide if I liked or not that I cared more about. Did you notice that when you saw it? Were they more, I don't know, was there something more emotional about the movie than the book to you?
There was, and I liked that. I thought that Clark was really smart, for example, to make Paige not completely crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That she has that speech at the end where she's actually really endearing and sweet instead of just being a full-fledged lunatic. And that's one of the changes that I like, going into it as a movie, is that Clark really makes the characters into human beings. I kind of wish I'd done that, but what the hell, it's too late.
So 9 years in between movies, was that conscious? Were you just waiting for the right thing?
Yeah, I'm just going to bide my time, get some books on the shelf, and then I'll spring another movie. No, a lot of it was because of September 11th.
Survivor, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It really made transgressive comedies just a lot less palatable.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of projects that just disappeared because people, you just couldn't bring them to market.
And is there something? Is the next one already planned out? Do you know what's happening next? Will the Survivor thing happen? Well,
it looks like Survivor is, if not the next one, it will be fairly soon.
Okay.
Francis Lawrence, the man who made I Am Legend this past year, has written the screenplay, and that seems ready for casting. Lullaby looks like it's going to go into production fairly soon, and Diary and Rant and Haunted are both optioned as well and being developed.